Game Freak is probably the only game development studio that I think truly prides themselves on releasing quality title after quality title. I don't think I can name a series as strong as Pokemon in terms of consistently fantastic releases. Even the games in the series that happen to be the least popular are still great games in their own right. Smaller projects like 2012's Harmonite and 2005's Drill Dozer are also honestly some of the greatest hidden gems of their respective generations, showing that Game Freak can still create amazing titles that don't build off of a 20-year-old established franchise. However, despite this, I feel the management and upper workings at Game Freak when it comes to the Pokemon series can be incredibly flawed. Not to say that this makes the games terrible by any means, but I do think that things could be improved to prevent Game Freak from losing their focus. I will admit that a lot of what I'm about to say in the later part of this video is speculation on my part. The Pokemon community tends to regurgitate opinions that others say and spread them like gospel. I'm not saying that's going to happen for sure, but take what I'm saying with a grain of salt considering I A, don't work for Game Freak, and B, only have a handful of information to back this up. To set the scene a bit from what we can gather, Game Freak was mostly a one-game studio. What this means is that they used to develop one game at a time using a large team. Nowadays, however, Game Freak seemed to have amassed enough employees to become a two-game studio. I know this might sound odd considering that Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise in the world, but they aren't as big as what a lot of people think they are in terms of development staff. As a result, I'd imagine Game Freak's development goes something like this. A main series Pokemon game is being developed by Team A, during which Team B works on some kind of spin-off or takes the time to pitch new ideas through their internal Gear project. To describe briefly, the Gear project is an initiative where any employee can pitch their own games to producers using 3 months to make their own prototype during work hours. The entire article is going to be in the description, which I recommend you read, but there are a few things we can pull from this interview that can help us understand Game Freak's inner workings a little bit more. First of all, the prototyping stage very clearly doesn't impact major Team A or Team B game development, since it's only a single person making their own thing until they get permission to make it a full game. The man being interviewed for this article is Masayuki Inouye, a programmer for countless Pokemon games and the producer of Giga Wrecker, a PC game that came about as a result of the Gear project. Additionally, Inouye drops a tidbit about having to work on a Pokemon game for several years, and it's nice to be able to take a break from that. For quite a while now, average AAA game development usually takes roughly 3 to 4 years, and I already imagine Pokemon was no different. Pokemon also reuses a great deal of assets between generations, so that time is probably a lot shorter. Another variable is that the amount of people working on the game, with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, only 20 people worked on it, and that game just took under 3 years to develop according to that game's director. A week from this video's upload, I plan to release a second half which ties into why this development was negative for Game Freak and how it possibly could have affected the release of a 3rd generation 6 game. Right now, the main point I wanted to make with this half of the discussion is that the constant switching up of Game Freak's directors is a major contributing factor to why the Pokemon series is just so polarizing. As I'm sure you can imagine, the job of a game director is very important. Being a programmer or even a designer means nothing compared to the job of someone who will direct others and shape the final product around their vision. Not to say that the other roles aren't important, when they definitely are, but I can't stress enough how important it is to be a director in this series. To illustrate about why having multiple directors can be considered a bad thing, I think I need to show you all the history of Pokemon directors. There's been about 7 so far, and the amount isn't the problem, but more so the fact that they bounce back and forth between each other quite a bit. It was relatively smooth sailing throughout the first 2 generations. Satoshi Tajiri was the director of Red, Blue, and Yellow, as well as Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Since then, he's worked on smaller, non-Pokemon related projects, though he's never came back to direct the series and has remained as Game Freak's CEO and the creator of Pokemon. Following this, Junichi Masuda took upon the main role of director for Ruby and Sapphire, and it was around this time where we started to see some shifts. Unlike Tajiri before him, Masuda never once directed a follow-up version or a remake with the exception of Fire Red and Leaf Green. This allowed other Game Freak members to step up to the plate and inject their own ideas into an existing generation. This is probably the best way to do things, making it so that new directors don't shape the outcome of a whole generation is probably for the best, and Masuda laying the groundwork for those new directors is a fantastic idea. As a result, Shigeki Morimoto had the role of director for Emerald and Heart Gold and Soul Silver. His ingenuity of presenting new ideas in almost completed or already built work shone through at the end of Pokemon Red and Green's development, where he managed to sneak in Mew at the last minute. He's an exceptional director who managed to breathe new life into Johto, pioneering its visual redesign to where many people would argue that it is the best in the series. Pokemon Emerald's various improvements stand the test of time as well, to the point where many still consider it better than Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, despite those games being more modern takes of Masuda's original games. Shortly after Masuda wrapped up work on Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, he took another break and entrusted Takeshi Kawaichimaru to be the producer of Sinnoh's follow-up, Pokemon Platinum. Platinum is also nowadays widely considered to be the best in the series due to Kawaichimaru's various improvements, and his history of being Game Freak's dedicated developer of the series' network systems did not go to waste. This was the first game that he could really strut his stuff in a sense, which is clear because of the now inaccessible Wi-Fi plaza, the introduction of the Versus recorder, and a new and improved GTS, and many more features. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know this, but he made it so that through the global trade system you could actually send other players messages through email, which is seriously impressive considering Diamond and Pearl didn't even have that feature at all. I imagine his most impactful work nowadays, because of the Wi-Fi getting shut down with the changes to Diamond and Pearl's plot, as well as the lasting impact of Platinum's improved speed over the originals. With the exception of Pokemon Quest, his last credited games were Sun and Moon and X and Y, showing that he unfortunately doesn't seem to have much of an impact anymore in the newer games, and will likely not be showing up in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Masuda then picked up the series back again with Black and White, allowing Takao Ono to follow up on his version of Unova with a completely original story in the form of a sequel. Ono's mastery of the series' visual design is showcased immaculately in Black and White 2's UI, but following these games in particular, Masuda's work began to change. X and Y were once again directed by Masuda-san, which naturally followed up with the Hoenn remakes being directed by another different face, Shigeru Omori. As detailed before, this was a common trend with what Masuda felt like doing with the series. He's even gone on record saying that he personally took Omori out to drink and told him that he wanted to direct Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. However, by the time Generation 7 rolled around, Omori remained as director of the main series with Sun and Moon, the first time since his introduction that Masuda did not lead off of a generation. Omori has now gone on to direct Pokemon Sword and Shield, which would seem like the natural evolution of what Masuda's role used to be. From this we can assume a few things. For one, Masuda probably spent a lot of time scouting for those who might succeed him in a directorial role of the main series with all of this experimentation throughout the years. Additionally, this would also mean that many of Masuda's traits fall in lines with Omori's as far as design goes. When you're essentially grooming someone to be your successor, it's no surprise that you teach them a lot and they take after you to at least some extent. This could be seen as a positive, as Masuda's consistency has been rather strong. Though I also think it's kinda detrimental because Omori also seems to have inherited his tendency to leave games unfinished, having follow-ups to the original game clean things up. You may have realized I've neglected to talk about the directors of Ultra Sun and Moon and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and there's a very good reason for that. In a Masuda-like decision that nobody saw coming, Kazumasa Iwao was chosen to be the director of Sun and Moon's follow-ups released in 2017. This is immediately concerning, as Iwao had to clean up literal blank spots in an unfinished game to make Ultra Sun and Moon seem worth the full price. I also want to make a video on why Sun and Moon was so terribly unfinished, but it's clear that the team behind Ultra Sun and Moon had a lot of work to do. So you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with this approach? Giving new and different people the reins to the series can help breathe a new life into an existing idea that was presented at the beginning of a generation, right? Well, yeah, that's true. Problems start, however, when the original foundation just isn't solid enough, or when directors bounce back and forth every year in between a generation, or when no follow-up is even finished to begin with. Each game having a different director really makes the greater series lose focus. Ever since Gold, Silver, and Crystal, we've had a total of 6 directors, and 3 of those participated in the last generation alone. I do think that's maybe why a lot of people have felt disconnected with Pokemon recently. I don't really feel it, but perhaps this creative overflow of sorts has left people feeling jaded with the identity of the series, and I think Masuda passing that torch is both a good thing and a bad thing. Just in the last 6 years alone, we've gotten games that presented new ideas with no follow-up, games that redefined all old ideas but were generally left unfinished, games exploding with new ideas that were unfinished and got the follow-up that it shouldn't have needed, and games that were perfectly okay but presented few new ideas at all. Especially considering that Pokemon Sword and Shield don't look to take inspiration from Let's Go in the slightest. Tajiri's original trilogies felt like a consistent world. For all of the shit that the older games kinda deserve on a technical level, the world building is fantastic, and it's why Morimoto's recreation of that world feels so magical in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. When you actively change directors every year, you lose that focus. Every game since Black and White 2 in particular has felt disconnected for that reason. It feels that with X and Y and Sun and Moon, Pokemon has been trying to hard reboot itself every single time, reinventing the wheel because we haven't stuck with a consistent director for a while that knows why that wheel was successful in the first place. Ultra Sun and Moon were fantastic for building upon the honestly weak foundations that Omori laid down, but because of his traits, it really does dishearten me to see that Sword and Shield might turn out the same way. Games like Diamond and Pearl and Ruby and Sapphire only really benefited from their follow-ups, but the original games never felt incomplete. Masuda's constant role in the series has been up in the air ever since X and Y, and I hope that Game Freak finally settles on a way to handle the loose experimentation that older generations had without compromising the main series' quality and design ethos. I don't really know what Pokemon wants to be. They've been giving us a lot of mixed signals for a very long time. Does Pokemon want to be a series that constantly presents new ideas but then scraps them in the next entry? Does it want to be a series that builds upon itself and maintains those new ideas? Or does it want to be a series that clings onto that nostalgia only to not add any new ideas at all and stick to what's worked in the past? Truthfully, I can't even answer that question. Masuda seems to hop back and forth between what he wanted the series to be, and with the direction that Sword and Shield are going, it looks like Omori is unfortunately doing something similar as well. Despite scrapping ideas and items to swap out for new ones, the series felt like a constant evolution which peaked at Black and White 2. Pokemon has never needed drastic change because we've gotten what Game Freak thinks that drastic change is twice now, and it only seems to be driving more people away. I realize that Pokemon will always be successful, but I'd like to see more Ultra Suns and Moons than X's and Y's. None of the games that I've talked about here are bad, and I love them all in their own ways, but there's no denying that between their development, Game Freak has lost their way. And the constant shifting of directors and ideas throughout the series' history doesn't work anymore because we no longer have solid foundations for new directors to build upon. That's why people thought Ultra Sun and Moon were unnecessary despite serving the same purpose as Emerald or Platinum. Nobody knows what Pokemon is anymore, so justifying a reinvention of your existing reinvention of the series is a lot more difficult than it once was. It's just a shame because there's so many wonderful ideas at Game Freak being thrown at the series, only for that series to regress because those ideas are just completely forgotten about in the next entry. Thanks for watching. Judging by the waveforms of this, I think this might have been a long one, so I hope you guys look forward to the next video that I have planned, which is on Pokemon Z, Pokemon Z, whatever the third Generation 6 game that may have existed? Maybe? I don't know, I've done a lot of research into directors and the history of Game Freak and how they tend to go about things, so I don't know, maybe we'll see when that video gets finished, but I'll hopefully see you guys next week from now. If it's not a week from now, it's when the next video is. So yeah, I'll see you guys then. Hope you guys enjoyed, have a good one, share the video, I appreciate it, and yeah, see you guys later.